Anthony stood, leaning in against the peeling wall of his cramped one-room apartment in Lagos. The air was hot and heavy, the small fan on his desk doing little to ease the suffocating heat. His laptop sat open on a rickety table, the glare from the blank Microsoft Word document mocking him. He ran a hand through his thick, unkempt hair and sighed. His final year project, a 10,000-word thesis on Nigerian politics, was due for submission in less than a week, but his mind was as blank as the screen before him. The loud hum of generators outside filled the evening air. It was a familiar sound in Anthony's neighborhood, a cluster of low-income buildings where power outages were as common. As the rising Sunday, his phone rang on the table, breaking the oppressive silence. He glanced at the screen and saw Joshua's name. Joshua had been his closest friend since secondary school. Joshua was a charismatic, confident young man who always seemed to have life figured out. Anthony hesitated before answering. Anthony. My guy. Joshua's voice boomed through the speaker, brimming with enthusiasm. Joshua, Anthony said flatly, wiping sweat from his forehead. Why the long face? Listen, let's meet at Ozone Lounge tonight. You need to unwind. Anthony's laugh was bitter. Unwind? With what money? My parents are struggling to pay my tuition. And I can barely afford to eat. Joshua chuckled. Don't worry about that. Just come. My treat. Anthony wanted to say no. He wanted to stay home and force himself to write, but the lure of escaping his grim reality for just one evening was too tempting. Fine, he said reluctantly. I'll come. Later that evening, Anthony stood outside Ozone Lounge, a popular spot for Lagos young and wealthy. The neon lights reflected off sleek cars parked outside. Their owners lounging confidently by the entrance. Inside, the lounge buzzed with energy. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke. Music thumped loudly, making Anthony's heart vibrate with each beat. He spotted Joshua at a corner table, surrounded by young men dressed in designer clothes. Anthony waved him over with a wide grin. Anthony, welcome. Joshua said, sliding a drink toward him. Anthony took a cautious sip, his eyes scanning the room. Everything here felt foreign and extravagant. Look around, Joshua said, gesturing to the flashy crowd. This is life. Don't you want it? Anthony frowned. Of course. I do, but how? My parents can't even afford to pay for my final year. Joshua leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Forget all that. There's actually a quicker way to make money. I mean, big money. Anthony's heart skipped a beat. Joshua. What are you talking about? Joshua smirked. Yahoo. The word hung in the air between them like an unspoken taboo. Anthony had heard about internet fraud, young men posing as wealthy foreigners to scam unsuspecting victims. He had even read about their flashy lifestyles in the news. I don't know, Anthony said, his voice hesitant. Joshua leaned back, studying him. Anthony, let me ask you something. Do you want to suffer like your parents forever? Or do you want to make it big? Please, think about it. For days, Joshua's words echoed in Anthony's mind. They haunted him like a shadow. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Each time he walked past the shiny cars parked on campus, or watched his classmates flaunt their new clothes, the bite of inadequacy grew sharper. At home, the reality was even more suffocating. His father, a retired civil servant, struggled to make ends meet. While his mother sold vegetables in the local market to supplement their meager income. Anthony's younger siblings looked up to him as their beacon of hope, yet he felt like a failure with no clear path to success. Late one night, as he stared at the blank page on his laptop screen, his phone rang again. It was Joshua. "My guy, how long will you keep pretending?" Joshua asked when Anthony picked up. "You're drowning, and you know it. Let me help you." "I don't want to disappoint my parents," Anthony replied weakly, though his resolve was crumbling. Joshua sighed. "Disappoint them how?" "By making their lives better. Think about your future. Or do you enjoy being broke?" Anthony was silent. The truth was, he didn't. He hated the constant struggle, the endless sacrifices, and the gnawing hunger for a life he felt was slipping further out of reach. "I am inviting you to a meeting," Joshua said, his voice calm but persuasive. "Just one. No commitment. Come and see things for yourself." Anthony said, "All right, I will try." The meeting was held at a lavish apartment in a high-end part of Lagos, a ward away from the cramped quarters Anthony called a home. As he stepped inside, he was overwhelmed by the sight of sleek furniture and expensive gadgets. Joshua rushed to welcome him, greeting him with a wide grin. "Welcome, my brother." The room buzzed with activity. Young men sat around laptops, their eyes glued to the screens, as their fingers typed furiously. Laughter and chatter filled the air, blending with the faint sound of music playing in the background. "This is where dreams come true," Joshua said, leading Anthony to a chair. A man in his late 20s approached them. His name was Desmond, one of the group's leaders. He exuded confidence, his gold wristwatch gleaming under the light. "So, you're the new guy," Desmond said, shaking Anthony's hand firmly. "Joshua's been singing your praises." "Smart guy, huh?" Anthony forced a smile. "I guess." Desmond chuckled. "Relax, man. We are all family here. Let's show you the ropes." They taught Anthony the basics that night. Fake profiles, persuasive messages, and emotional manipulation were the tools of their trade. It felt surreal, like a game with no rules. Yet the stakes were real, and the rewards, they promised, were enormous. "Your first client might take time," Desmond said, lighting a cigar. "But once you get the hang of it, the money will flow." Anthony left that night with a mix of excitement and dread. He wasn't sure if he could go through with it, but the allure of quick wealth was hard to ignore. Days turned into weeks, and Anthony's determination began to grow. Each unsuccessful attempt to lure a client left him frustrated and questioning his decision to join the group. But one evening, as he prepared to shut his laptop, a message pinged. It was from an elderly woman in Europe who had fallen for his carefully crafted persona. They chatted for hours, and by the end of the week, she had sent him $500. Anthony stared at the notification in disbelief. The money was real. His heart raced as he calculated what $500 could do for his family. Joshua and Desmond celebrated his success with cheers and pats on the back. "I told you, didn't I?" Joshua said, grinning. "This is just the beginning." With his first taste of easy money, Anthony was hooked. Within months, Anthony's life changed dramatically. He bought new clothes, upgraded his phone, and even sent money home to his parents, who were too grateful to question its source. On campus, he became a figure of admiration and envy. His peers whispered about his sudden wealth, but Anthony waved off their attention. Joshua and Desmond introduced him to high-profile parties and connections. The allure of their world consumed him. blinding him to the moral compromises he was making, but as his wealth grew, so did his greed. Days later, Desmond introduced Anthony to Yahoo Plus one night, casually explaining its role in maximizing earnings. "It's simple," Desmond said. "Clients respond faster when there's spiritual backing. It's just business." Anthony hesitated. The thought of rituals and sacrifices made his stomach churn. "Don't be naive," Joshua said, his tone firm. "This is how the big boys roll. You've come this far, haven't you?" Against his better judgment, Anthony agreed. They visited a herbalist on the outskirts of Lagos. The man's piercing gaze and mysterious chants scared Anthony, but he followed through with the ritual. When it was over, the herbalist assured him, "Your wealth will flow like a river." It did. Within weeks, Anthony's bank account swelled, and he bought a car and rented a luxury apartment. But the price of his choices began to weigh heavily on his soul. Anthony's rise in wealth and status brought him into contact with Lagos' elite social scene, where he met Amanda at a charity gala. She was unlike anyone he had met, a confident, intelligent woman with a captivating smile. Amanda wasn't impressed by wealth, she was drawn to ambition and character. Her sharp wit and genuine warmth disarmed Anthony, who found himself falling for her almost instantly. Over time, their relationship blossomed. Amanda's presence brought a sense of normalcy to Anthony's chaotic life. She spoke passionately about the importance of integrity and hard work. "You're smart, Anthony," she said one evening as they sat on her modest balcony overlooking the city. "You have the potential to do so much good. Imagine what you could achieve if you applied yourself honestly." Her words stung, not because they were harsh but because they reminded Anthony of the path he had abandoned. For the first time in months, he felt a pang of regret, but whenever he considered leaving the fraudulent world, Joshua and Desmond would pull him back, reminding him of the sacrifices they had made. "You're in this for life," Desmond said during one heated argument. "The spirits demand loyalty. You can't just walk away." Anthony's heart sank under the weight of their words. As Anthony's wealth grew, so did his paranoia. He noticed unfamiliar cars parked near his apartment and strangers who seemed to be watching him. One fateful night, the EFCC raided his apartment. During a lavish party at his penthouse, the party was filled with music, laughter, and expensive liquor. The atmosphere was electric until a loud banging interrupted the revelry. "Open up, this is the EFCC." Chaos erupted as officers stormed the apartment. Joshua was dragged out in handcuffs, but Anthony managed to escape through the back door, sprinting into the night with his heart pounding. The raid sent shockwaves through his world. He couldn't eat or sleep, constantly looking over his shoulder. His once carefree lifestyle had become a nightmare. Desmond, unfazed by the arrest, suggested another ritual to cleanse their paths. This time, the stakes were horrifying. Human blood. Anthony recoiled in horror. "I can't do this," he said firmly. Desmond's expression darkened. "Chairman, unfortunately, you don't have a choice. The spirits don't forgive betrayal." Anthony began distancing himself from the group, but the consequences of his actions seemed to follow him. At night, he heard whispers calling his name. Invisible hands choked him in his sleep, and shadows danced across his walls. He was haunted by terrifying visions of the rituals he had performed. His relationship with Amanda crumbled. When she discovered his fraudulent activities, "You've destroyed everything good about yourself," she said, her voice trembling with anger and sorrow. "I can't be with someone who has no respect for life or integrity." Her words were a final blow to Anthony's crumbling world. Anthony's paranoia reached its peak when his car veered off the road one rainy night. The crash left him with a permanent limp and a disfigured face. The EFCC intensified their investigation, and it wasn't long before they caught him. His story made headlines, and the once revered campus star became a disgraced criminal. Prison was a harsh reality check, stripped of his wealth and status. Anthony was forced to confront the emptiness of his choices. During one of the prison's outreach programs, he was invited to speak to young people about his experience. "I thought wealth would solve all my problems," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "But it only brought me pain. If I could go back, I'd choose honesty and hard work every time." His raw honesty struck a chord with the audience. Anthony's story spread like wildfire. It became a cautionary tale for young people tempted by the allure of fraud and rituals. Many heeded his warnings, choosing legitimate paths to success. Upon his release, Anthony returned to a world that had moved on without him. Alone and broken, he spent his days reflecting on the irreversible consequences of his choices, but help came in unexpected ways. With the help of a local NGO, Anthony began mentoring at-risk youth, using his story to steer them away from crime. His sessions were raw and emotional, filled with lessons learned through pain and regret. "You don't need to walk my path to find success," he often told them. "True wealth comes from a clear conscience and the knowledge that you've built something real." Over the years, Anthony's efforts began to make a difference. His work with the NGO expanded, touching the lives of countless young people. Though his journey was marked by mistakes, Anthony found purpose in preventing others from making the same ones. His limp and disfigured face became symbols of the price of his choices, and the price for greed and quick wealth obsession.